This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 350 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about moments of kindness while travelling. First, I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today. Now, it is 4 years, apparently, since I last did an episode about the kindness of the people we meet when we travel. Often it's the kindness of strangers or, well, people who were strangers and soon are not. But given that finding kindness is actually a super common occurrence when we travel, I think 4 years is far too long to not have an episode on this topic. So here we are today. I have definitely had just so many moments during my travels when people have been, well, unnecessarily kind. Like in Japan, I remember so distinctly more than 20 years ago, I was struggling to buy a bus ticket in Kyoto. You know, the machine, I couldn't understand the machine. And some strangers just gave me their tickets and refused to take money or anything at all. Just please have them and enjoy your day. So lovely. In Seoul, in South Korea, I will always remember the most delightful woman. She'd actually been called over by the kiosk owner who I'd asked for directions, and he couldn't speak much English, but he called someone over who I think looked younger. He probably thought she would speak more English, and she did. And she went massively out of her way, backwards and all over town, to help me find my tiny kind of unknown hotel. So lovely. More recently, in southwest of Western Australia, I kind of unexpectedly needed a lift back to town because I had expected to call a friend for a lift, but where I was turned out to be outside of mobile phone range and I couldn't make any calls. A lovely couple from Melbourne who I came across in the car park, they not only took me back to town, but they went totally out of their way to take me all the way back to my accommodation because they just decided we were having a nice chat and it would be a nice detour to fill in a gap in their day. So lovely. And that's just a few incidents I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure you have some similar experiences too, and our guests certainly have as well, and I have heaps of heartwarming stories to share in this episode. So I think it's a really, really nice one. Now, first up is a quick story that is about super kind people, but also a bit of a tricky situation when Patrick Nash was travelling in Sudan many years ago. He was essentially hitching a lift on a truck from Khartoum in the north to Juba in the south. But for the purposes of this story, it's important to know that Patrick was or is a lifelong vegetarian.
On day 4, the lorry stopped at a small Dinka village. So Dinka are the kind of largest ethnic group native to South Sudan. So the lorry driver spoke to a group of the men and then came over to me saying, the village has never had a Westerner stop here on a lorry. They'd like to speak to you. So of course I said yes, and the driver very kindly translated. English is the kind of colonial language in that part of the world, so things were a bit easier for me. Anyway, the village elders wanted to know all about where and why I was travelling. So I told them I was heading to Swaziland to visit a friend, because at that point, that was what I was doing. And they didn't know where that was. So I got out a stick and drew a map of Africa and showed them where we were and showed them where they were. And, questions like, well, how many days walk is that? Yeah, so it was really interesting. Anyway, there was much chatting after that among the elders of the small village. And now most of the women and children had arrived. So eventually they spoke to the driver and he said to me, they're keen to offer you a special delicacy with dinner. This is a great honour and you must accept it.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, oh, no, here we go. But, I kept it cool. So the elder came up to me and presented me with a small steaming item. It was a sheep's eye. I've rarely been so horrified at the sight of something in my life and hope that...
Was it obvious what it was? Was it?
Yeah, it was obviously... Well, it was a small animal's eye, so I figured
it looked like
it wasn't a cockerel and it wasn't a cow. That was pretty much the only choice in the middle.
But it clearly looked like an eye.
It was an eye. I've rarely been so horrified. I mean, they boiled it, but, it was... I just hoped it wouldn't show. I had to smile and say thank you and somehow eat it with the whole village looking on. It was slimy, fortunately quite small, and I just shut my eyes, placed it in my mouth, which I hope they thought was a kind of spiritual way of approaching it. To this day, I honestly don't know how I got it down without throwing up, but somehow I did.
Oh, well done.
I washed it down. I struggled to avoid vomiting, and then I bowed to them.
And said, that's enough. I don't want any
I've
more.
dined out on that story and put people off their food more than once.
Poor Patrick. I really do sympathise and empathise. I have been a mostly lifelong vegetarian myself. I was brought up that way, and I do not know what I would do faced with that similar dish and the need to be polite to these very kind people. Now, my next guest is Ros Belford, and Ros is a writer who was headed to Sicily for a work assignment with her 2 little kids in tow, but it definitely did not start out as smoothly as she'd hoped.
I arrive at Trapani Station, which is the station nearest to this island, at midnight. And it's the first station I've ever been to in my life where there were no taxis. And this is a major city. There are no taxis. I'm thinking, oh my God, I was there with the kids in this huge double buggy, a big suitcase.
Oh, they're that little.
I mean, they were tiny. They were 2 and 5. So it's like, what am I going to do? So I find myself outside the station at midnight with 2 tiny children and no taxis. So I'm like, don't panic, don't panic. The other thing I should say, this is 20 years ago, and I did have a mobile phone, but at that time, English SIMs didn't work in Italy, so I couldn't do anything.
It was useless, yeah.
It was useless. And booked a hotel, but had a number, but couldn't phone them. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And I was standing there and I noticed that there was a phone number for a taxi on a little metal cupboard attached to a lamppost. So I thought, okay, dragged the pram and the suitcase over to the phone boxes, feeling really hopeful. There were 6 of them. I thought one of them's going to work. Nope. Every single one was out of order. Went back to the taxi rank, just in case by some miracle a taxi had returned, but nothing.
No.
I thought there's nothing I can do. I'm just going to have to walk to the hotel, which was about 2 miles away. And I thought, oh. And then at that point, someone said, are you all right? And I was like, turned around. And it was a guy who'd actually helped me get the pram on the train at the station where we'd got on. I said, no, I need a taxi and we've got to get to the hotel. He said, don't worry. And he got his phone out. We dialed the number on this little metal cupboard on the lamppost. And he's going, it's ringing. I said, yeah, but the phone's ringing inside that cupboard.
Oh,
no. It wasn't like, a mobile phone to a taxi. It was like the phone at the empty taxi rank was ringing. So it's like, oh my gosh, now what are we going to do? And looking around this station, this poor guy, he was about 80. His face is sort of showing that I need to help, but, what have I got myself into here? And we're looking around and we see these, like in stations, you always see these, there are always really dodgy men hanging around. Anyway, there's all the usual dodgy men hanging around. One of them walked up to us and spoke to this guy. And I'm going like, what's happening? He said, he's just offered to be our taxi. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds a bit dodgy. But I've no choice.
Not much
and
choice.
I can see no choice. I'm not going to walk 2 miles with a suitcase and a pram at midnight in Trapani. So the guy says, I think you're going to have to do it. And I said, yeah, I agree. So the guy comes up with his car and it's this little Fiat Cinquecento, which are tiny and it's falling to pieces. And I think, I'm not going to get everything in. With the nice guy who's called Sebastiano, he said, look, you leave the pram and the suitcase with me. The taxi will take you to the hotel, come back, pick me up. So that's what we did.
Oh my goodness. What a nice man.
It was, I mean, honestly, that guy saved our life. And then the wonderful thing was that he actually lived on the island that we went to. So we did keep meeting him. And every time I saw him, I thought, oh, there's my guardian angel.
I love it. Everyone needs a guardian angel. I had a similar experience actually recently in Geraldton in Western Australia when I arrived on a flight fairly late in the day, and I had pretty much the same story with the taxi. There was a button to push, but the button to call for a taxi certainly didn't seem to call any taxis. I think it was probably also ringing somewhere in the airport, and I was only rescued by a kind stranger who said, "Hey, you're probably not going to get a taxi, come and share mine." And he took me and another similarly lost kind of person. And it was a very kind and lovely moment. Now, my next guest is Jonny Wright. Jonny's a traveller and a podcaster who's done a lot of hitchhiking, and that hitchhiking has definitely taught him a lot about kindness.
I do a lot of hitchhiking, so that means I put myself in very vulnerable positions. I stand on the side of the road and I stick out my thumb and I'm just kind of exposed there. Cars are flying by. It's very loud. It's a little dangerous, but people recognize that and they recognize what I'm doing. Many of them see that invitation that I'm offering. I see hitchhiking as a kind of invitation to interact with others. I'm standing and I'm just saying, here I am. I'm also saying, this is a place I would like to go to. But I'm saying anyone is free to interact with me. I am open to interactions. And that is a position that is oftentimes met with beautiful gestures. That's what I've found, is that when I choose to make myself vulnerable and when I allow myself to be moved by another person, most of the time they choose to move me in positive ways. So I've had many experiences of this in my time hitchhiking through a bunch of different countries, and I talk about these stories much more in depth in Go and Find Out, my podcast. But some of these things have just been as simple as sharing a meal. I remember one time I was hitchhiking through the eastern part of Turkey, and in the east of Turkey, near the border with Iran, the hills are very steep and the sand is so many different colors, and the drives every day were completely different. So it was just this ever-changing landscape that I was moving through. And there were also a lot of military checkpoints and stops. So it was a little bit more scary for me as I was moving because I didn't really know what those might lead to. But I remember one time I got picked up by a trucker who was moving through the mountains on his way to the Black Sea. And I was trying to get to Georgia that day. So I was trying to cross the border from Turkey into Georgia and passing through these just incredibly steep mountain roads where the trucks would have to go very, very slow uphill. And then downhill, it was an exciting ride of twists and turns. And it felt like maybe it wasn't going to stop. It was scary and it was so beautiful. And then we came upon this small city that's ensconced in the mountains called Artvin. Beautiful city. And this trucker was stopping for lunch and he said, "Oh, come on, I'm going to feed you." So we walk into this, probably the most beautiful truck stop I've ever been to. It was this restaurant where the windows looked out right onto the hillside where the city is built into. And we just sat down and it was mostly just other truckers in that space. And we had this beautiful meal. And of course, these guys are making this drive every couple days. They do it a few times a week. So they're very used to this environment, but it was so special to get to share that with them and for them to bring me into their world. A little later, as we were cresting one of these hilltops, we stopped the truck at this very small tea stand where there were about 5 other trucks already stopped. And it was a gathering of these truckers, and these were not even busy roads. It was really wonderful to see this small collection of people who wanted to see each other and wanted to spend a little bit of time with each other. And they invited me into that. And so there were so many forms of kindness that I got to learn about as I moved through these different places. But one other thing that I found was that to accept kindness is a kind of surrender. I found that sometimes I was resistant to accepting. Sometimes I didn't want to accept because I wanted to maintain control of myself, of my time, of whatever it was. There were moments when I had to really think and question my intentions. Because in one sense, I thought maybe I was being a better person for not accepting a kindness because I'm like, oh, I don't want this person to spend money or spend their time doing whatever for me. But when I questioned those intentions and what was really going on there, I found that I was actually wanting to just maintain control, and I wasn't willing to surrender to their kindness. So that has been a learning process of, in those interactions, in those spaces of giving and taking, recognizing that both are happening simultaneously. There is giving and there is taking, and that can involve food. It can involve words, stories. It can involve money. It can involve just smiles and kind of energetically giving to someone. I found that it's a lot more complex than I thought it was.
I've got some more stories to share about Jonny's hitchhiking experiences in a future episode, and it's certainly something that teaches you a lot. My final guest today is Chris Magnuson, and he is telling the tale of a trip to South Africa some years ago where some strangers who were relatives of the woman who his college roommate was marrying quickly became firm friends.
My roommate from college got married in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Okay.
I'm like, sign me up. I'm coming to the wedding.
Yeah.
And so he married a South African of Indian descent. So it was this huge Hindu wedding in Johannesburg.
Cool.
And I was like, sign me up. It's great. Fantastic time. Wonderful. Met the family, stayed for like a week. We even, traveled around South Africa a little bit. But like the last day or so, we're back in Johannesburg and they're kind of doing all wedding kind of, stuff, kind of, saying bye to family and that sort of thing. And I'm like, I want to do some visiting in Johannesburg. I got a rental car. I'm like, hey, to the brother of the bride, right? So he's like a teenager, but he's like 18 or 19. Anyway, so I've got a rental car. I'm like, hey, let's go to Soweto. There's this great museum. I want to go check it out. And my flight was that day, right? I was like, oh, okay, great. So we'll go to the museum and then we'll come back. I'll drop you off and we'll go. So we're coming back from the museum. He's on his cell phone. He's like, oh, hey, my mom just, made this meal and she wants to feed you before you go. And it's just like, okay, I'm never going to say no to a homemade meal, especially like homemade Indian food. I mean, come on. So I drive up to the house and I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, I can stay like maybe 20 minutes because I got to get on the road to the airport, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm sitting down, I'm eating, I'm chatting. The food is amazing. And they bring out more dishes. And I'm eating at the table by myself because they're like, this is like, we're feeding you because we know you're traveling. You know what I mean? Because it's like 2:00 in the afternoon. It's not like a real meal time.
Yeah.
So I'm down there. It was just like this huge spread of Indian food. And the family's there and we're all chatting. It's not like I'm by myself. And it's so good. And I remember people were like, all right, I think you should probably get going. I'm like, I just do one more bite. Come on, just one more bite. So I'm okay, I can, it's 5 more minutes. Okay.
I'll just drive a bit faster.
That's always in the mind. It's like, when am I ever going to have this experience again? So I'm totally full and totally so happy. And then you're saying your goodbyes to this big family. So that takes a few minutes. So I get in my car and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the airport. And I fly down the highway and it's pretty simple to get there. It's basically you go on the Beltway and get there and there's like one turnaround.
What can go wrong?
What can go wrong, right? And I don't have a cell phone, right? So I have an actual map. And so I'm like, okay, let's go. Driving. I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh no, I need gas because I got to return this car with gas, right? So I'm like, okay, here's the exit. I bet you there's a gas station this way, So I get off, I find a gas station, I fill it up, got to get back on and get to the airport. I get on and I'm going the wrong way.
Oh no.
And I know immediately I'm going the wrong way.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, I just got to get off on the next exit. And the next exit is like 7 kilometers away, right?
Oh, it's like, always when you do that, yes.
I know. I'm in this really, really, really like the most budget, barely holding together car. My foot is totally down. The gas pedal is all the way down. I'm going literally as fast as this car can handle, which is probably about like 70 miles an hour. And I finally get to my exit. I turn around, I come in, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, okay, check-in closes in like 10 minutes for this flight to back home to Atlanta. And the next flight isn't for another couple of days, right?
Ooh.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to make this. So I'm going through this calculation in my head. I'm like, how am I going to make this happen? I need to check my bag before I return the car. Because if my bag is on the plane...
They'll probably let me on the plane.
They'll probably let me on the plane.
Yeah.
okay, how do I do that? I mean, I'm doing this like driving as fast as I can, making sure I don't miss the airport. I'm going to roll up and I'm going to basically abandon my car, grab my bag and run it. So I come up and there's all these porters there. And, they got the vest and the number, and I know they're official airport, and they're hyped to grab your bag, and you pay them tips and that sort of thing. I jump out and this guy's like, hey, can I help you? I'm like, yeah, but I need you to just stand by my car. So I grab my bag and I was like, you stay here. And so I tipped him a little bit of money. I grab my bag, I run in and I check in, I get my ticket, and they're like, boarding starts in 5 minutes. I'm like, sweet.
I'll be back.
Run back out. And I literally, in my mind, I'm like, I got to get to the car rental place. I go in my pocket, I grab all the cash I have, I give it to him. And the porter is like, holy crap.
It's my lucky day.
I know. I'm in my mode. I was like, I got to get out of here. And it's all South African rand. So I'm like, I'm not going to use this anyway.
I might as well just give it to him.
I probably tipped him like, probably the most tips he gotten all day. I mean, it wasn't a ton.
It wasn't like $1,000 or anything.
It wasn't $1,000. It was probably like maybe $50, $60, right? I get back in my car. Now I have no bags and I'm driving. Again, you're in the airport. I make a wrong turn to find the rental car. So I'm like, time is ticking. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? Now my bag's on the plane. So I'm driving as fast as I can. I come around the corner and I drive into the rental place. And it's one of those rental places that is actually in the basement of the airport. So it's not like in a far lot or anything like that.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yes.
So I fly in and I'm like, I don't have time to check in. So I literally run through, and the counter is like across the way, probably about 30 feet from me. And I'm running through the aisle and there's all these people in line. And I just yell at that guy. I'm like, hey, I'm checking in. I'm late. And he looks up at me. I hold the keys in my hand. I look at him. I make eye contact and I kind of nod. I'm like, are you ready? And he's like, what? And I just shook the keys at him, right? As far as I can. And he catches them. And then he just smiles. He's like, go get it, man. I'm like, yeah. And I'm booking as fast as I can. And then, the story is I actually make my flight. And
amazing.
And then I sit on the plane for an hour before it takes off.
Oh, so no. Kindness and chaos in that story. I would summarize it as kindness made him late for the airport, but kindness saved the day as well, as it often does. So thank you very much for listening to episode 350 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Let me tell you a bit about where you can find my guests and their fabulous work. So firstly, I chatted with Patrick Nash. His website is patricknash.co.uk, and you can find his great book, Shots Across the Water, Tales of a Journey Through Africa. I then chatted with Ros Belford. Her website is rosbelford.com, and she has a book about this Sicilian experience called Children of the Volcano. My next guest was Jonny Wright. You can find him everywhere that you search for the Go and Find Out podcast, which is about some of these experiences he's had. It's a new launch and a beautiful podcast, so I highly recommend a listen. I also finally chatted with Chris Magnuson, and Chris is, of course, from streetviewvagabond.com, and you can also find Street View Vagabond on Instagram, where there's always something fun to entertain you. I'm also in the show notes going to leave links to some of the other episodes we've done on the kindness of strangers or travel kindness and all of these really, really heartwarming things. The links are in the show notes, but you can also just look for episodes 76, 88, or 242. If you have a kind travel story to share, come along and do so in our Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers or our LinkedIn group for Thoughtful Travellers. You can find the links in the show notes or just search for Thoughtful Travellers on those platforms. And of course, do sign up for the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter on Substack. To find that, you can go to thoughtfultravel.substack.com. All these links and more in the show notes. And for this episode, they are at notaballerina.com/350. Stay kind when you travel because it all comes back, I think. It's come back to me 1,000-fold. I was thinking I have to go out and do some more deliberate kindness, I think. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.